Okie dokie. So we just click over. Welcome everybody to the People Committee for the Fire and Rescue Service. I'm Mary Wiley, I'm the chair of the People Committee. And just a few things in terms of meeting hygiene, which we're all more than well aware of by now, but if we can make sure to mute ourselves while we're not talking, and if we can use the hand function as well, that would be grand. You'll note as well that the meeting's being recorded as well. Just before we get started, I think I would like to just publicly acknowledge, I think this is the first public meeting that we've had since the outbreak of conflict in Ukraine. So obviously we just want to wish very much that there'll be an early resolution to that situation as far as we possibly can, a peaceful one wherever at all possible. And of course, within the fire service, all of our thoughts are going out to the people of Ukraine. And for anybody affected by that within the service, I just want to encourage them to seek the help and support that they can get within the service itself. And please don't hesitate to come forward, but just wishing again our thoughts and our early resolution at all, if possible. On that note then, if we can, I just want to also acknowledge, just in case that John isn't with us, and we'll come back to that as we get to the end of the meeting, but John Dickey, this might be your last meeting. I'm very disappointed that we won't be able to potentially say goodbye in person, but I won't let you sneak away before we say something at the end, but I'm conscious that you are going, so in the event that I overrun, I just want to acknowledge that now, and we will come back and we'll have an opportunity, I'm sure, John, to see whatever incriminating photos and jokes and things we can in the future. But I just publicly want to say a huge thank you for all that you've done so far. And again, we will come back to it before the end of the meeting.
Thanks, Mary. Very kind.
Not at all. It's nice bits we'll say just now, John. We'll save everything else for later. Okie doke. On that note then, if we can, let's please move on. Any apologies for absence, Ali?
No formal apologies received.
Grand. Sure. Thank you. In terms of the agenda itself, can I check with the committee, are there any items that are being proposed to be taken in the private session that you feel should not be taken in the private session? Equally, are there any that aren't, that should be? In this instance, I will take silence as agreement. Excellent. Any declarations of interest across any of the items on the agenda? Excellent. Okay. In which case, can we move on then to item 5, and that's the minutes of the previous meeting, which was in the 2nd of December. It does not feel like it was that long ago, but it was. In terms of accuracy, are there any points within the agenda? I'm not going to go through it page by page if there's any points at this point. John Dickey.
See, I'm still committed, even though it might be my last meeting, I've still read the minutes. Thanks, Chair. Page 3 of 8. 7.21.
Yep.
I think that should be Q2 report.
Yep.
And then the second bullet point, trainee freighters, it says.
Sorry, you've just made Fiona choke, I think. But yes, you're quite right. It should be trainee firefighters. And
the next one, the next bullet point, 11 whole-time trainee firefighters commenced training at Newbridge Training Centre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And lastly, on page 4, last bullet point, it says TFOC twice. Don't think it's required twice.
Okay.
That was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Well done. Any other points of accuracy across the minutes? John, your hand's still up, but I'm assuming that's a historical hand. Excellent. In which case, are we all content then to approve them as an accurate record? Are there? Okay. Excellent. Can we move on then to agenda item 6, action log? Ali, can I hand this over to yourself?
Thank you, Chair. For the minute, Ali Cameron, Group Commander, Board Sport Manager. So just to confirm with the committee, in the summary of actions, we have 6 in total, 2 of which have been marked blue as completed. So just to confirm that the committee are content with the position statement updates, and for those 2 to be removed, leaving 4 actions currently still marked as green and on target for completion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ali. Just before I ask if there's any questions, you will see across a number of the actions that they are linking back to the proposed session that we have in April for a conversation with the committee before we take them through to the next point. Are there any other questions or queries though in relation to the action log? Are we all content then with the status of all of the actions? Excellent. In which case we will move on now then to item 7 and to the performance and risk reports for Q3. So we'll start with the pod one, and I've got Mary down, is that correct? Or is it Scott, is it yourself?
I've been called many things, Chair, but Mary's a first for me. But it's myself that it sits with. And if it's okay, I hopefully all colleagues on the call have had the chance to read the report. I don't intend to go through it page for page, but maybe just pick up from I think where we left off last time. I wasn't at the last meeting, and Lindsay presented our 6-month report, and I think on the back of that there's some feedback in relation to the size and sheer volume of information. So I guess just maybe to cover some of that with the committee today. What you've got in front of you is the quarterly report that some might be familiar as similar in format to what we presented back in September. And this is our intention going forward, that this is the kind of streamlined version for Malcolm, you might remember from a couple of years ago, it was 40, 50, 60 odd pages long. So we've been working really hard to streamline what it is we're reporting on and sharing with you, and just recognising, Chair, the session that you mentioned in April again is going to be an opportunity for us to develop that even further. So it's very much been a work in progress over the last 12 to 18 months or so. So hopefully with this report we've managed to capture expectations of the committee. We've added in the exec summary at the front that highlights probably 3 of the key areas in relation to that absence creep that I think we're starting to see across some of the in fact all of the directorates. Recognise the ongoing challenges that we've got in terms of recruiting and retaining staff, particularly support staff, given the challenging recruitment market we're experiencing across the UK. And then there's also reference in particular to work that we're doing with colleagues in OC. Their absence spike, if you like, sits maybe a wee bit higher than that of other directorates. So we've just tried to capture that in the summary of the paper. With a look ahead, and as I say, without getting into the details of the data, looking ahead, we're clearly going to be focused on, as we hopefully stabilise within the pandemic and look to the return to the office in whatever shape, form or guise that might take for individuals, teams or directorates. That's obviously something that we'll be keen to share with you in terms of how we progress with that. And what I would like to do, Chair, if it's okay with you, before opening it up to questions, just share a template is something that we've been working on, as I say, for the last kind of 12 months or so, in terms of how we might present our information to you going forward, which is more of a dashboard form, and hopefully once we finalise it, comes with a very significant health warning. It's just a first draft, so there's more iterations to come, but we're really keen to present our data and information in a more engaging visual way, as opposed to just be a combination of text and tables. So if it's okay, I'll share it with you very briefly, and then I'll come back and happy to take questions from the committee, which I'm sure my pod colleagues will help me out with the answer. So bear with me 2 seconds. See if this comes through. And hopefully you're seeing that now.
Yep, it's up on the screen. It's quite small, is all I would say.
I'll see if I can try and increase in size, which might be out with on Acrobat Reader, might be out with my gift to do, I'm afraid, but we can certainly circulate it but just for the purposes, as I say, it's very much a first draft of how we would like to start to present you. The narrative's important too, but in terms of making sure we can draw some visuals, we were chatting about it yesterday within the directorate about having run charts as opposed to bar graphs and some images and the likes that draws the the reader's eye to key stats or information. But again, something that we just wanted to introduce and share with you is the direction of travel in terms of how we're working on the report, and how we might present it to you on a quarterly basis. But something we'd be really keen to revisit with you at that workshop in April too. So don't screw your eyes up trying to read the text of the narrative in there. That's just for filling spaces, if you like. But working very closely with Chris Fitzpatrick and the team in terms of how we can present our data and our reports in an engaging way. So I'll stop sharing the screen now, and happy to open up to any questions that colleagues might have on the report.
Thank you, Scott. And just before I bring Malcolm in, I think the early feedback from ourselves, we really did appreciate. I think the executive summary did help. I think it was Steve earlier who previously commented that it does help to focus what's going on in there. I've got a couple of things I will highlight myself as we go on, but I'll bring Malcolm in just now.
Yeah, thanks. Malcolm Peyton, board member and member of the People Committee. No, thanks. That looks really interesting. Just one question about that. And I appreciate we're not going to spend a lot of time on that just now, but I'm pretty sure it said up at the top right, live data or something. So is that actually live? Is that coming from a system without a great deal of manual intervention? Because that's obviously the place we'd like to get to, that we can actually look at real data that's coming in.
It's exactly that, Malcolm, and I can't speak in terms of Chris who pulled it together what that stands for, but the principle you've just shared is trying to get it as up to date as we possibly can with that limited time lag, so that we're reporting as much
really
time as we
partly
can.
that it's live, but also that it saves the time of officers actually producing stuff, because you're actually getting it direct from a single source. So that's fantastic.
And most definitely looking ahead to the PT FAST program and the benefits of developing our the functionality of the systems we've got. That's a key part within that program too. The line managers and directors get that real time information and
that's excellent. As I say, I don't want to divert it too much for that just now, but I thought that's really helpful to know. In terms of the actual report, just one question. I'm looking at page 28 of the papers, page 11 of the report, and just glancing at the figures and doing comparisons of the ratios and so on, and the long-term absence for RBC and RDS, the musculoskeletal is much higher than psychological. But when I look at day duty, they're kind of comparable. It just seems to me that ratio is not all that similar to the other ones. So is that just small numbers, flexibility in data, or is there any comment at all about? So what I'm really looking at is page 11 of the report, day duties. The first two figures are kind of similar numbers, whereas for the other operational ones, the first column tends to be maybe 3-4 times the size. So I just wondered if there's anything at all in that data that's worth commenting on.
I think it's a good spot, Malcolm, and I think as an area, it's actually something in John and the team might take come in. It's actually something that was getting explored and questioned at our National Safety Assurance Board, just in terms of what it is we're doing for RDS to make sure that the support that's offered for day duty staff is absolutely comparable. Obviously, it's a different context in terms of RDS and their day job, if you like, and what they do, but it's definitely an area that we're currently exploring in terms of how we can make sure that we're best supporting RDS, because that data certainly came through by way of the musculoskeletal injuries, and see how we can, as best as we can, also through the musculoskeletal working group. It's not easy to say. I should just say MSK, shouldn't I? That might be easier for me if I just say that. But through that group, and what interventions and initiatives would support that employee group.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Malcolm. Steve?
Thanks, Chair. Steve Barron, Non-Executive Director of the Board. So I found this report very accessible, and I thank you and your team, Liz and your team, for responding to prompts given at the committee in the past. I like the executive summary drawing our attention to the areas where focus is perhaps most appropriate. And the template that you put on screen briefly with the live data, that particularly looks as if it would be a very helpful tool for a relatively quick analysis of where the key points are. And for me, that's key. So thank you for that. So just in terms of the areas to which you've drawn attention, 44% more days lost in Q3. I mean, congratulations to the service for keeping operational performance as high as it has been, given that statistic, because that was and will continue to be a huge challenge. And the high vacancy rate, 14% overall and 9% in support staff. These are big numbers. And while one understands that the impact of COVID won't be forever, and that we have to see it as perhaps a blip on our trend analysis, I would be interested in any comments you've got about impact on morale, because as we reach a point at which we begin to think beyond the crisis of COVID and into a sustainable future, it'd be good to know what morale is like as a result of low staff levels, colleagues absent, and worries about people's own health. And finally, the 16.5% absence rate in operational control. I mean, that's a scary number, and must be a number which has put us at risk of delays and compromises in terms of how control is managed. So again, I'd be interested in any comments we've got about how that was managed, but congratulations to the service for coping with these numbers. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Steve. Yep, if it's okay, I'll come back in just and then maybe bring some colleagues in. Just in terms of the morale parts here, I think it's a absolutely valid point to make in terms of challenges that we've been facing by way of just numbers and the day job and things like Omicron and the likes, and what's been happening over the last 3 to 6 months. One of the key things I think we're starting to see across directorates, and I can very much vouch for Pod in this regard, is being careful about when I say how ambitious we are. That's not to say we're not ambitious, but in terms of what we're committing to, and recognising that the business as usual that's been created and developed over the last 2 years is still there, and sometimes we can use that phrase as a bit of a safety blanket to say, okay, it's okay, business as usual. Well, that was fine. Business as usual will take care. Business as usual is actually really swelled in the last 2 years, so we've very much got an eye on making sure we look after the day-to-day activity and the resource and the impact that's having on our respective teams to deliver on that and not lose sight of it. So things like our annual operating plans, when they make their way through the governance procedure, you'll see with that they're pretty much stripped back this year in that regard, and that's not to say we will still be progressive and innovative and do stuff, but what we aren't doing is starting off on a point where we might be overstretching ourselves. So the point in morale is really important, and we're acutely aware of that in terms of making sure we don't overstretch our respective teams by continually to add to what is a busy environment at the moment. So it's key that we don't lose sight of that. In relation to the point you make there around OC, I think it's a point that myself, Liz and Lindsay from Pod, along with Stuart and David and Libby, we met recently to discuss how we can support that area of the business, and recognising that it's OCs have its unique environment in terms of how it works in the area that it supports the organisation, and we're acutely aware of systems and things like COP26 and COVID. That combination of factors would appear to be working its way through in terms of that impact. So I'll pause there. I don't know if Stuart maybe wants to come. I see you've got your hand up, Stuart, if you want to come in on the back of that from an OC perspective, but it's certainly something we have on the radar. Stuart, I'll bring you in now.
No, thank you. Thanks, Scott. I'll perhaps pick up the OC point first, and then just maybe go back to your first point, Steve, around about the impact of kind of Omicron. But in terms of OC, Scott's already outlined some of the work that we're doing. Libby's also put together quite a comprehensive action plan to deal with the morale issues and absence levels within OC. We've also established a strategic group with the rep bodies in order that we can have those discussions at that level and collectively and in partnership come up with some other solutions about how we can make life for OC better going forward. But as you're aware from various other forums, the OC staff have been under considerable pressure for a number of years due to change, but that's also been magnified by the impact of COVID and obviously Omicron over this reporting quarter. In terms of the quarter 3 stats, the impact of Omicron was completely, not unprecedented, but we modelled absence levels up to 25% abstraction rates for that period and reported those to Scottish Government. What we actually experienced on some days was in excess of 30% absence levels, and it wasn't uniform across watches, so that brought its own complications. So hugely challenging period for the organisation. It came on at pace. It was incredible how quickly the impact of Omicron was felt, particularly over the festive period, and the work that Flexi duty managers done, but more importantly our central staffing team done over that period in order to maintain appliance availability was nothing short of incredible. And the control rooms were not exempt from that. In some days they dropped to very, very critical levels of staffing, but continued to deliver the high quality of service that we come to expect of us as well. So it would be remiss of me not to, and I've done so in the Service Delivery Committee, acknowledge the work that was done by all staff over that period in order to maintain the service delivery over that period.
Thank you. Stuart, I think I'll pick up a little bit around some of this when I come to my own remarks at the end, but I think the committee itself is incredibly appreciative of all of the work that's done in order to be able to keep that going, and I will pick that up before we get to the end, because I think that if there are opportunities for us as a committee, and indeed I suspect for us as a wider board, to be able to demonstrate that gratitude, I think we would be grateful to hear of what we could do, because we don't underestimate what people have had to do to be able to do that. If we can, then I'll move on to Paul's question.
Thanks, Mary. Paul Stollard, non-exec. Steve already mentioned the vacancy rates, and I've heard quite a lot since being on the board about the vacancy and the problems of RVDS. What struck me in your report was the support staff vacancy rate, which was 9% or something like that, and that struck me as incredibly high. And I haven't heard very much in the board, maybe this is not the appropriate place, to talk about what you might be thinking about to encourage recruitment, what measures you're taking to try and start replacing, filling. You've also quite a high turnover rate. I think it's something like 2.5% for the quarter or something like that, which is worrying. So any thoughts on that? I'd be really keen to hear.
Sure. Yep, happy to come back in there, Chair, is that okay? Yep. Paul, I think maybe just in terms of the spot around the support staff, and I guess, you know, the vacancy rate being high, there's a couple of factors, obviously, in terms of the compete in the external market. I think also too on the back of the work we did last year in terms of, and the number of business cases were approved. So there was quite a significant amount of recruitment last year over and above normal recruitment through business cases that we approved. And what that also generated was quite a bit of internal movement too. So we were successful in bringing some people in from outside the organisation, but there was also, I would suggest, an increase in the internal movement of staff over and above what was normal. So we've got a wee bit of a fallout of that, if that makes sense, in terms of filling some of those roles that will go out to market on. But again, I think what's really exciting is, in terms of, as an organisation, we're continually looking at how we can improve our recruitment practice and processes, and appeal to the external market. I think also too about how we look as an organisation in terms of being an attractive place to come and work and selling the benefits. A conversation we've just had recently in Pod, and we're going to be trialling with some of our vacancies over the next couple of weeks, is how can we shorten that period it takes, the time that it takes to recruit people by way of advert through to interview through to start date. It's too long at the moment, and where we are, we know we're losing candidates across the organisation to other organisations because they've got more than one option. So if we can make that quicker, in terms of from start to finish and get the offer and the contract out, we've got a better chance of not losing candidates. So from a pod perspective, we're looking to get a trial a process where it's an advert out, it's a CV application, it's an interview on application. And instead of taking, you have 3 weeks for a closing date and then another 3 weeks for interviews to be held and another 2, we're going to try and do that and fast track that in a way that it could be a kind of 3 or 4 week process from start to finish. And I think that's one example of how we're looking to explore new ways of working, test and trial and see if they work, new ways of working that will help us get people into post a lot quicker, get offers out a lot quicker, and hopefully get us ahead of the competition when it comes to recruiting and appointing people.
2 quick points. Are we competitive in what we can offer in terms of conditions and salary? I expect salary is not good, but are we good on conditions? The agile working, does that help?
Yeah, I think we're a competitive proposition. I think the salaries are good.
Okay.
In terms of I think certainly across public sector, I think we compare well. Not in all posts, and I think we see that in some areas. There's obviously roles being developed now that were invented 3 or 4 years or so ago, and we're competing across all sectors for that. But public sector to public sector, I think we compete quite well. There's certain roles, even in the last 6 months to 12 months, that have oh goodness, really. HGV drivers is the example I'm trying to give, in terms of the demand, and that's really, increased significantly. So we're also seeing trends where people are looking to undertake roles, and so this is it's not just exclusive to SFRS, but people are leaving to undertake roles for significant more amounts of money and to do something they isn't the profession and isn't the role. We know from within, speaking with Dean Morris and the mechanics, we've got people who now are preferring to sit in the vehicle and drive them rather than be under them and fix them. So people are making career choice. But I think, again, from a pod perspective and the strategies we're looking to pull together, employer brands are a really important one for us, and then making sure that we're selling that externally. I think if you go into the SFRS website, I think we look at a attractive proposition in terms of how we speak and say, but there's things in there around total reward and the likes that we'll certainly want to develop.
I'm sure we're a good brand to sell. It's just about competitive on cost, sorry, on wages. And on the time scale, do we require Disclosure Scotland for virtually all our jobs? Is that a significant delay? Do we need to require it for all our jobs?
Yeah, we tend to just now, but again, it's another area, Paul, that we're looking at, because it's all risk, isn't it? In terms of the risk of losing somebody versus waiting, 3 or 4 or 5 weeks for Disclosure Scotland to come back with a check. And that at times it's okay if you're within a kind of 4 to 6 week process, and disclosure are taking 2 weeks. When they push out to kind of 4 or 5 weeks, it does become at times problematic. But what we do is make a decision there in terms of that risk, and depending on the post and the role, there's ways in which we can bring people on board without having to delay it as a result of disclosure. So we do react to those situations as and when they arise.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of things, Scott, just from my own. I mean, I think most of them, to be honest with you, have been kind of covered. I am conscious that the committee have previously indicated that we might want to have a spotlight on the RDS situation, and not just as it specifically connects in terms of recruitment, but retention, training, so across the piece. So I think just to flag up that we had hoped possibly to have that at the next committee, but we'll have a conversation with board support as well offline in terms of what's possible. Very conscious, of course, ongoing, that we still have a lot of pressures within the teams, and we don't want to add to that, but we do. I think as a committee, we're still looking for a wee bit of assurance around what's happening in connection with RDS, because it is a significant challenge, I suppose, for the organisation as a whole. But connected to that, can I also just flag up that I think I would certainly appreciate it, and based on the conversations and the queries you've already had, I suspect other committee members would as well. And that is just if we can keep an eye on that talent attraction and retentions issues, because we know that across sectors at the moment, regardless of the role, it's incredibly competitive for employers to be able to actually attract and retain staff. And it would be useful to know how that's playing out within SFRS going forward. I'm sure you had plans to do that anyway, so it's just flagging that up. Hopefully it's not adding anything. Outside of that, I think we would definitely welcome the dashboard type information that you're presenting. Just I suppose a wee flag up is that data is data. It's how we interrogate that data, and to what questions are we using to be able to extract what we're getting. And just as a flag, because obviously it came up as part of the actions at the last committee, and we got an update following that, but in relation to, say, grievances held within our parameters, it's useful to know that figure, but without understanding what percentage that figure actually represents, as in how many of the ones are we actually meeting within our targeted window, it's not necessarily as meaningful otherwise. So that's just one example of possibly where it would be. And then that relates to some extent to that proposal that we've got in April, where the committee are going to come together in the first instance, because we are not fully reconciled ourselves to what it is that we're actually trying to ask you guys to do, and that's an unfair position to put you in. So we need to get ourselves together and understand what it is that we're asking. And I think what spoken very briefly to Ali about it, but we'll get board support to put some time in the diary, maybe in May or June, for us all to kind of come together. And in the interim time, though, Scott, if there's anything that you're needing our feedback on in terms of what you're developing, then please do let us know. But we'll keep the lines of communications going on as well. Is there anything in terms of that, Scott, that you want to come back on just now, or is there anything from anybody else?
No, I think that's great, and as I say, this has been a work in progress over the last kind of 18 months. So really looking forward to working with yourselves as a new committee, if you like, in that sense, and getting different ideas and thoughts. What we're trying to do is hone in on the indicators we've got within the performance management framework, but you know, there's other areas, so much going on that will be of interest, and whether it's a spotlight or drill down in a specific area, then we'd be delighted to present that as and when required. Thanks.
No, and seriously, if yourself and Stuart and others can please pass on, because I mean, if you look at the challenges you've had in terms of absence rates, etc., but to have kept the service going in the way that you have, I know that I and the rest of the committee just genuinely really appreciate that commitment. So thank you so much, and for the report itself as well.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on then to item 7.2, and I think if I've got this correct, and we'll test that because I failed epically at the last one, but Bruce, I think it's yourself who's taking the first section of this.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yes, it is me indeed. I'll take a similar approach to the one given by Scott, and I won't go through the report page by page. I'll just draw your attention to a few key points, then ask for any questions. So the points I would draw your attention to are all in relation to how risk has been moved. So the online delivery of our incident command courses, both levels 2 and 3, and importantly level 1, is now moved to a virtual process, which gives us the ability to reduce the backlog of incident command training that we were building up as a result of the COVID restrictions, and also allows flexibility for delivery in the future. So we're getting that really good quality information out to the people that need it. And apologies, don't know what happened there. My PC froze for a second. You've got me back again. So yeah, a full review of the TFOC process. This is going to allow us to harmonise training across the whole country. So everybody will be training on the same thing at the same time. This allows a number of benefits. It allows us to be more agile when we get new equipment, procedures or developments, or if anything's learnt from incidents in relation to a safety issue. It allows us to be much more agile in relation to when something comes along, because potentially with the system as is now, it could be 3 years if a new piece of equipment is introduced to the service before operational crews come to that on their 3-year maintenance phase development planner. So this now allows a quarter by quarter approach and harmonises that. It also builds capacity within the training function, because we can work smarter to deliver the same subject to a number of stations at the same time using facilities such as Teams. And the final thing that I'll highlight from the key successes is the trainee course pilot that's underway at the moment at our National Training Centre. This delivery model it really is as a result of the strength and flexibility we've introduced with the harmonised terms and conditions of our instructor cadre, and having 2 trainee firefighter courses running concurrently over the 14-week period is the first time either in our history or any of the 8 legacy services histories this has been done over a 7-day continuous training process. This allows the throughput of trainees to be increased. Importantly, because as we know, as it was highlighted in the previous section, that vacancies are a worry. So this has allowed more trainees to come in to come closer to the retirement profile. A couple of points I just want to highlight in relation to some of the stats that are reported, which are a little bit confusing. One is that on page 15, we appear to indicate that we've trained more than 100% of station establishments when it comes to water rescue. That anomaly is as a result of a review that was carried out into how many people on those stations actually require to have those skills. So we've actually trained not more than 100% of the people, but more than 100% of the requirement that is on those stations to get that capability out the door. And in relation to the volunteer duty system competency numbers, it appears very low. It was just to highlight that the volunteers only do the advanced modules of the incident types they may get turned out to, which is a significantly reduced subset of what retained or whole-time personnel can be turned out to. But the reporting tool unfortunately allows us to report against the full number of advanced modules. So the volunteer crews predominantly will get turned out to instances such as wildfires, fires in the open and RTCs, which is significantly less than the 24 advanced modules that are available to be trained upon. And Chair, I'll stop there and happily take any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Bruce. And just before I invite the committee to come in, I've got a couple of questions myself, but just to remind everybody, this is about the training section. We'll come on to the health and safety in a second. Just in terms of that last point first in my wee head, so in terms of page 17 and 18, Bruce, I suppose the bit where I struggle then to look at the figures is that the point about the over 100% of the people required makes kind of sense. But in terms of the figures then on 17 and 18, those are actual numbers of individuals. There is there's no competency level that we're saying that we have to have met. Am I right in interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, so the figures that are reported there, Chair, are the actual number percentage-wise of the resource-based crewing, retained duty system and volunteer duty system. That's the actual percentage of the people that have attained the competencies that are required.
Okay. I guess the reason I'm asking is, are we setting it to say that we only need 9% of what we need is done, or actually 9% of the available staff are trained in this and that's okay? Does that make sense, Bruce?
It does. I think, to be honest, Chair, if I can, I'm going to ask Kenny Barber if he can add a bit more detail to that and give a bit more of a detailed explanation. My take on it is that that's the number of the percentage of people that have done the modules that are required of them. But I might be wrong on that, and Kenny might be able to add more detail.
Grant. Kenny.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't know if my Teams is frozen. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, Kenny, and other people are not.
Everybody just looked very static there. I wasn't sure whether my Teams had froze again. No, I can probably just clarify what Bruce has intimated there. That the stats are there to demonstrate each year our units are trained to, whether it's wildfire, RTCs and the basic elements, so that from an operational perspective, they're trained on these skill sets, but the reports pull against all the modules and data. So what's there isn't overly concerning. I think I touched on something similar a couple of quarters ago when we got a similar question around that. So we are working behind the scenes. Perhaps the new TFOC I'll be able to realign some of that, but it's not anything that's given us any angst currently, Chair.
I suspect you probably did, Kenny. Unfortunately, with my wee head, you have to tell me 3 times before it necessarily sinks in. So I will get there when I ask you the question the next time around, Bruce. Don't worry. The other key questions, just before I go to the rest of the committee, was I suppose it's great to see the online availability of training and all of the things that opens up, and it's fantastic and it really future-proofs the service. But there are a few firefighters of my acquaintance in my personal life, and as much as I love them dearly, they're not people who are IT confident, I guess, Bruce. So it's a question of, are we, not without going into the details, but are we making sure that we're putting in place assistance to the individuals who maybe find that IT side of things a little bit more challenging than others?
Absolutely, Chair. We've got a number of instances where bespoke support that's been required has been put in place, not just for ICT challenges, but for neurodiverse issues as well. So we absolutely look at the needs of the learner and tailor our delivery of whatever's being presented to them to make sure that it meets their needs and that they can have the same equitable access to training dependent upon their needs as everybody else.
Thank you very much, Madhu. Are there any other questions from anybody else in the committee? Is it just me? In which case, I would just like to say thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Kenny. That was really useful, and I think a sign the no questions means that you must have got everything perfectly. It was just me who was a little bit behind the curve on that. So a huge thank you to you both.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay. In which case, can we move on then to the health and safety part of this? And Julie, I'm going to hand over to yourself.
Thanks, Chair. And maybe just to start by echoing Scott's sentiments earlier on, we had a very beneficial and worthwhile discussion with Paul regarding our report format, and we are drafting a report format and we'll await the outcome of your engagement that you've referred to in April before we finalise that, but certainly moving to a more dashboard with kind of succinct points as to kind of key risk areas. With regards this quarter, again, I won't propose to go through the whole report, just to point out some of the key areas. With regards risk movement, we have had an increase in our risk movement with regards to the development of our in-house health and safety management system, and that is due to resourcing issues with ICT. However, we have had some discussion, and we hope over the next few weeks that will be addressed and that risk can return to its previous position. With regards our health and safety improvement plans, we note a 1% increase compared to last year, and I think again it's been acknowledged by the committee the absence levels that we had in Q3, particularly in the build up to Christmas, and I think to have achieved a 1% increase in those challenging times is worthwhile of note. Our key performance indicators show a positive trend in all areas with the exception of COVID, as I think the board would expect. We report on the reduction in near misses of 27% as a negative trend, if you like, in the sense that we compare that against our accident injury, including RIDDOR statistic. And if the near miss is a greater reduction, then we look on that negatively. If it is a lesser reduction against that, then that would be a positive trend. However, to give the board some comfort, the key ratio or the key areas that the HSE look at is our near misses against RIDDORs, and if you look there, you'll see it's definitely a positive indicator as far as the HSE are concerned. If we look at our RIDDORs, again, just something I'd like to point out that in Q3 we had one RIDDOR accident, which again is well done to the organisation, and that was an over 7-day MSK injury, so we've had no significant injuries sustained in that period. Our COVID figures for Q3 identified 3 work-related transmissions. However, it should be noted that, again, due to the absences in the lead up to Christmas, there was a delay in processing some of the forms that had been submitted to HR. So that trend may change in Q4 as we clear that backlog. But again, to offer assurance, we've been in engagement and discussion with HSE, and they're absolutely fine with that. Again, kind of key points. Our working days lost, generally fairly static or an improving picture, with the exception of the 4 to 6 day category. But again, really just to note that unfortunately we have an increasing trend in the days where there's no information available. Our common accident causations, it's like if you're of a certain age, you remember the top 3 and top of the pops, and it used to always just change and they change position. It's a bit like that. So we continue to have our slips, trips and falls and manual handling, often competing for first and second position, and very much dependent on the time of year, how that changes. I think, again, maybe worthy of note is whilst there's a lot of focus on MSK, if you consider the nature of the business, to have within Q3, 4 events that have resulted in an MSK injury, then again, it's just worthy of note. And I think really, Chair, that's probably the key points in there. Near missing, we've kind of addressed, and the acts of violence. We are seeing a steady increase in acts of violence, and we are engaging with our colleagues, and I'm sure Stuart will come in here, that we're looking at some pledge to be signed with other blue light responders in an attempt to address that, and we will continue to engage with those local areas that are seeing the upward trend. Again, I think of note, it's increased during the pandemic. So as we hopefully return to business as usual within society, we hope that trend will go back to its original position. And that's really all at this point, Chair.
Thank you very much, Julie. Are there any questions from the committee? Oh, crikey. In which case we'll go for Paul first, and then we'll go to Steve. Paul.
I think this is a good quarter report. I think we should be paying tribute not just to Julie, but to the staff who are helping and making this, and for the cultural change which it represents. So positive and all good. So that's that. I think the fact you only had one RIDOR is really remarkable for an organisation of this size in what is essentially a manually based risky business. So I think that's really good. The only thing that reading them more carefully that struck me is you're seeing a steady rise in vehicle accidents. But I wonder how many of those are actually, I'm assuming that virtually all of those do not lead to any injury to persons. And I wondered if it's just worth just thinking about, is the increase in rise just people are actually being honest and reporting that they've scraped something or they've knocked something, rather than before they basically just got their mate to paint it out or knock it out or solve the problem for them, because obviously it's not good and you don't want it to happen and you want properly trained driving assistants, etc., etc., etc. But as far as I can see from this, we're not seeing significant numbers in which people are getting run over or people are getting knocked down. So I don't know whether that's a fair assessment, that it might be just more honesty or not. That was just a passing thought.
Chair, if I could respond to that. I think it's a really good point, Paul. What we generally see is our vehicle accidents are clipped mirrors, bumps, appliances coming off, small roads. And I think everything with relation to vehicle accidents, it's always with the caveat that we are sending a large vehicle, sometimes up very narrow, tight roads. It's not like many other industries where you may be able to reduce and change the size of the vehicle according to the roads that it's serving. So a significant amount is associated with that. We do still have a fair amount of vehicle accidents that occur within our own station premises, which are avoidable, and that's a focus that we continue to push. But yes, I think you're right. I think there's an element of that we will never really be able to avoid, because we need an appliance to get to our location, irrespective of the type of road it's travelling on.
Hopefully, Paul, that answers your questions. Excellent. Steve?
Thanks, Chair. And I agree with Paul. We should take excellent assurance from the accident statistics that are improving. Well done to everyone. And I'm encouraged also by the development work on a dashboard, and looking forward to seeing the impact of that. The one question I had was about the health and safety improvement plan, and at page 20 of 39 for the report, there's a lot of reds there, and overall it would appear to be behind where we would expect to be at the end of Q3. I'm just really asking, are we going to catch up? And if so, are we going to catch up in year, or will it be into the new year?
That's a good question, Steve. We are assured by our colleagues in the other directorates that we are catching up.
Just with respect, Julie, that wasn't my entire question, though.
Yeah. We are anticipating that we will catch up. We have deferred a number of actions to the next year just due to the absence and the reprioritising of resources and staff's attention in Q3. Does that answer the question, or is...
I suppose that Julie suggests then that you're not anticipating that we will catch up really until the next financial year at this point.
We're hoping that we'll catch up and reflect the position that we had and build on the position that we achieved last year. So we are hoping to still beat that. Whether we achieve 100%, I don't think we'll do that because of the challenges on the service.
Okay, I think John wants in on that particular point though.
Yeah, it's just to build on what Julie said there, Steve. These are fluid as well, so there's other things go into the improvement plans as we progress through the year. So sometimes it will fluctuate up with other things being added through other instances happening. So sometimes it will still rise. I do take some comfort that there's a lot of work getting done across the piece on each of the directorates to address this, bearing in mind the lack of staff that we've had in Q3, COP26, and other things that were going on. So, for example, operations was so involved in preparation for COP26, they had to focus specifically on that. So I know for a fact that operations are now actively pursuing reducing the number of actions in the action plans. These are monitored by the National Safety and Assurance Board as well on a quarterly basis.
That's grand, thank you. And the challenges are well understood. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, John. Malcolm?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, again, really not just good information, but good trends, and great to see the progress there. And I appreciated the comments on near misses as well, because that's always the one that we're thinking, is it good or bad if we've got fewer near misses? But I certainly thought if the overall number of accidents are going down quite significantly, then, and the number of near misses has gone down, that seemed pretty good to me. A couple of things. I think this maybe got a mention last time, but on page 65, page 33 of the report, just above the table, it's saying there continues to be an increase in the number of health and safety events with no information available. So again, just some comment on that. Is that process, or is it pressure of other work, or what can we do to try and bring it in? Because obviously, if we need to have as much clear information as possible to ensure that the accuracy that we're aware of the information. And a similar sort of point, I suppose, the very final page of the report, you're saying that 51% of vehicle accidents require driving assistance to be in position, but of these, in 55% they weren't used. So basically, there's quite a number. So again, is that low-hanging fruit? Is that something we can just make people aware of? That is, look, in some of these cases, actually, there's something we can do here that's quite straightforward. Thanks.
Thank you, Malcolm. In relation to your first point, page 65, the information regarding working days lost. We do regularly follow up our business partners to upload that information onto TAS, and we are engaging in discussion with HR to see if we can try and tie in and source that information by other means if it's not being uploaded onto our own health and safety management system. So that work's ongoing, and we would hope to be in a position to start that in the next financial year. With regards to driving assistance, that is promoted very regularly through the National Safety and Assurance Board and through the quarterly reports that we provide to our colleagues within service delivery. We are also liaising with our colleagues in training, and we will be publishing a low-speed manoeuvre interactive module in next quarter that we anticipate will be delivered as a kind of team brief within the station to try and focus minds and to outline SFRS's procedures, but equally well what we've chosen to do this time, which is slightly different from previous, is we've taken a real life case in which a driver was prosecuted for not utilising the driving assistant in the way that it should have done. So a slight change in how we're putting the message over.
Okay, yeah, a bit scary, but yeah, that I'm sure that will help get the message over. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, in which case, Julie, I know you're going to do the next item as well, but it seems appropriate when we pause at the end of the report just to acknowledge that John's not the only person retiring sometime soon. Whilst we're a relatively new committee, I can hear Anne Buchanan in the back of my head, and she would never forgive me if we let you go without saying a huge thank you from all of us here and from our previous members of the committee as well. So I'm hoping it's no coincidence that you're going at the same time as John. Anytime we lose anybody, it's always a bit of a tragedy to some extent, because we lose an incredible wealth of experience as well. So huge thank you, Julie, for everything you've done.
Thank you, Chair.
And on that note, I think then we'll move on and invite you to the next item, I believe. Sorry, I was distracted with my notes, Julie, but I think it's yourself on the safety assurance strategy. No, Kenny is next.
Kenny.
Jumping ahead. Getting excited. Sorry, Kenny, I wasn't ignoring you.
No problem, Chair. Kenny Barber, Area Commander within the Training, Safety and Assurance function. Today I'll give you an overview of the independent audit into the action plans from HMFSI. Committee within Appendix A gives of the report gives a dashboard of all the current live action plans, and this is contained within the papers for noting. I'll give you a wee bit more in-depth overview of the HMFSI thematic action plan for the training of retained duty system personnel. For the last reporting period, there's been steady progress, albeit we've not completed any actions, but we do work away in the background. You'll see from the overall progress that there's been a 6% increase in the work that's done to date. And whilst I intimate that there's no actions being completed, if we look at 7.1 and 7.2, they're extremely close to completion now. We discussed earlier in the meeting around the launch of the new training for operational competence, which will go live on the 4th of April. That will close both the actions, bringing in one of the actions a year ahead of what we had proposed. So I think, you know, the team are to be commended with the hard work that's went in behind the scenes to push that on. There's also, albeit it is slightly late, but we're close to completion around now getting the broadband rollout to all our VDS stations, and again, that will significantly help in the training of our firefighters. I know we touched upon the utilisation of technology, etc., but that will help, particularly around the reporting and recording. We have a number of staff that are using their own time and devices just to get to that. So, you know, we are grateful, but that will greatly assist in moving that forward. So, Chair, just as in the recommendations, the committee are asked to note Appendix 1 within the report and scrutinise Appendix 2 of the report, and at that I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kenny. And just before we do, if there are any questions indeed, I just want to acknowledge that to bring an action a year before, we're very quick as board members often to query about the deadlines of things, but to deliver something a year in advance, I just want to add our our congratulations to your own there, to the team, and please do pass that on, because actually that's not something to overlook, especially in the current COVID circumstances as well. So well done.
Thanks, Chair. I'm sure that's passed on. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions around any of that? Malcolm, you went old school.
Sorry, Chair, didn't quite get to putting the hand up quickly enough. Thank you. Yeah, no, it was just to check the state. There's a number that are deferred, which is fine. I just wanted to check kind of what the process was with that. Does that mean you will review them again at some point with a view to making them live again, or just to check what exactly we mean by deferred? Thanks.
Thanks, Malcolm. Good question. No, they have been deferred for varying different reasons. We will go back through them as a function, and put a proposal should they feel this required. But there is a number of different reasons. I'm happy to maybe chat off table if you wish to go through it, because there's quite a lengthy rationale for some of them, but they're deemed to be deferred at the current.
I wasn't so much questioning the rationale for that. I'm happy with that, and it was just, do we have some way of bringing them back into process at some point? Is that required? Where are we with that? That was really just the question.
Yeah, again, it's maybe not quite as simplistic as yes or no. That we'll review them as intimate and decide whether they are required. Some of them have been deferred for significant reasons, and it would be a significant period of time before they could come back online. But we can, as I say, I'm happy to discuss off table and go through them if you wish.
Okay, thank you.
John, do you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, please, Chair. So just building on what Kenny said there, Malcolm, is a good question. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. John Dickey, Director of Training, Safety and Assurance. Whilst they're deferred, Malcolm, some of these things are also captured in other pieces of work. So, for example, the Continuous Improvement Programme or Continuous Improvement Plan for training. So if you look at item 12, which is, we're talking about, item 12.1, which is talking about Regulation 19. So that in itself, we're waiting on that enactment to happen. So we can't actually bring that forward until it happens. But there is an audit process within Training, Safety and Assurance that will review these action plans and ensure that anything we have deferred is still valid, either to remain deferred or will indeed be brought forward for Training, Safety and Assurance to take forward, but also to come forward to this committee in the future for further scrutiny.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, John. Thanks, Kenny.
Thanks, Chair.
No problem. Unless there's any other questions, then can I just say thank you to everybody in our Training and Safety Directorate for those reports. That was really appreciated. And again, I think the number of questions that you're getting reflects the quality of the reports that you're getting coming through. So a huge thank you for all of that. And I got so excited I wanted Julie to take on the next item earlier on, but we are now on to yourself, I think, again, Julie. So my apologies, we're on to item 9 and the Safety and Assurance Strategy.
Thank you, Chair, and it's really refreshing that somebody else gets excited about health and safety. The purpose of this report is really just to provide the committee with the opportunity to provide some feedback on the proposed safety and assurance strategy prior to publication. We acknowledge that there is no legal duty to have a safety strategy. However, we feel that the strategy reinforces our commitment to safety and sets out over the next 4 financial years our key areas of focus. The strategy is designed to support SFRS's values and our strategic plan through the progression of 5 key themes as outlined in 3.3 of the report. It continues to build on the good work and the strong foundations that have been developed over the last few years, and that the board acknowledge in our performance reports. It does, however, introduce more proactive safety audits going forward, which is an area that we've been unable to fully resource over the last number of years, and it allows us to complete that cycle of plan, do, check, act a bit more robustly. The vision of the strategy is outlined in 3.6 of the report, and that will be implemented through a number of themes broken down into defined objectives each year, culminating in the organisation being in a strong position to achieve the recognised Health and Safety Management System accreditation of ISO 45001. So it's really just, Chair, at this point to seek any feedback on the strategy.
Okie dokie. Can I ask if there's any feedback from the committee? Paul?
I already had a chance to look at this, and I would want to thank John and Julie for giving me that chance to look at it over a couple of weeks back in February. I endorse this, and I'm really only commenting now to say that I've done that and to the fact that I support this and endorse it. I think it's good practice. I would make minor changes, but I think they're fundamentally minor. I think the key theme for all in any safety plan has to be culture, and we have compliance as the top one. And I've said this to John and Julie. To my mind, we have a good culture, and any organisation, safety comes from the culture and the way that is put forward, the leadership, the training, and everything else goes with that. We have health and safety not to comply, but because we believe it's the right thing to do. The compliance is just a check box that we do after we've got the culture right to ensure that we're covering all the bases. So that's the sort of level of trivial stuff, in my opinion, about how things are ordered. But fundamentally, I think this is a good piece of work and I'd like to endorse it.
Thanks, Paul. I don't know if John or Julie want to make a comment about aspects of that. Okay, John?
Yeah, I'll quickly come in. As Paul said, we got together and had a morning session going over this, and Paul gave us some pointers and some of his opinion. It was really welcomed by both Julie and I and Jim. We took on board everything that Paul said. As Julie started off with it, there's no requirement for it, but when Julie and I first started on this journey with the health and safety, and in particular around the safety assurance strategy, it was around building a strong foundation moving forward, bearing in mind what was coming around the corner with changes of staff, myself and Julie moving on at some point, and it was to give our successors to come in to have a good document that they could work off that's moving in the right direction, but also taking the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service in the right direction with one of our key values, which is safety, and that's just not of just the firefighters, but the community as a whole, and not just our firefighters, but all our staff. So we think captured it in that context, but to use Paul as a sounding board in this instance, it made it very easy for us to get the document in the right frame, and hopefully it's an easy read, because I've read some strategies up and down the country and they're long-winded documents. We wanted to try and make it quite short and succinct and to the point. But as everybody on the call, I'm sure will understand, health and safety, sometimes you can't put it in one page. I'd love to have got a strategy on a page, but when it comes to health and safety, there's just no chance we can do that. But I'd like to just put on record that my thanks to Paul for his support and his scrutiny of the document prior to coming here.
Thanks, John. Steve, you had your hand up for a moment. Do you want to come in?
My question's been answered, Mary. I was going to ask who was it for, who's going to use it, but John's answered that, so thank you.
Okay. In which case, I think the committee seems pretty content with it. I would maybe on occasion some people might call me a little bit picky about public sort of documents, John, but I always think the fire service produced some incredibly accessible documents, and this is one of the best. So a huge thank you to you. I think I appreciate your point about wanting to get it on a page, but you know what, you came about as close as it was physically human possible to do, so well done. It looks good, and I think it is easily understood, and as I said, very accessible to whoever's coming into the future, so thank you very much. Unless there's any other questions or queries, we'll move on then to item 10. In which case we're on to the community aligned directorate risks, and I think this is with yourself, Liz.
I think, yeah, I'm happy to kick it off, Chair. I wasn't planning to get into it in a lot of detail because it is fairly self-explanatory, and others who own these risks are very welcome to chip in as required. I think the important thing to point out, there's nothing startling that's changed in this quarter, since last quarter, and I'm hoping that the committee will be assured of the work that's going on to mitigate the risks. I think on that basis, looking at Appendix 1C, which starts on page 110, is the important document here to let the committee see the progress that is being made against the planned mitigations. Just to point out one that's still showing red at this moment, and that's around the challenges around RVDS recruitment. But what I would say is that the improvement group that has been set up on the back of the wider RVDS project is now achieving some really brilliant movement on some of this stuff. And in my own area, for example, we're looking at how we deliver medicals in remote rural areas and things like that to put more power into the local areas. So there's some quite innovative things coming out of that I hope will help us with that. But it is a very holistic approach, and it's being targeted by every directorate in support of that. So that's definitely the one that's still challenging. But otherwise, I would just leave it open to questions, or if any of my colleagues in other directorates would like to make any specific comment about their own areas, then happy to do so.
I suppose in the first instance, then, is there anybody within any other areas who would want to make a comment on anything? John? John, you're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just quickly, I realise this is quarter 3 we're talking about, but I am aware the risks that are identified for my area of responsibility come to my DMT, and they're moving. They're subsequently moved since the production of this report. I know for a fact they're moving in the opposite direction because of actions that SLT have agreed or are taking place across the organisation. So I'm comforted that they're moving in the right direction, which is downwards, and the risk will change. The committee will see a change in the next iteration of this on quarter 4.
Thanks, John. I'm just before bringing Malcolm Stewart, do you want to come in as well?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on a very similar vein, I think Liz has already articulated really well the impact of the RVDS improvement board that I chair, and that is definitely making inroads into dealing with what is a very complex issue. And as John's already highlighted as well, some of the risks that are looking at being read at the moment are definitely moving in the right direction. And that speaks to the point that I think Kenny made earlier around about or Bruce made around about the use of doubling up training courses in order to bring more staff in. The training recovery plan is in place by John and his team as well to address that skill shortage that has occurred over the COVID period.
Thank you, Stuart. Malcolm.
Yeah, thank you. Very positive. And I like the way it actually links from the very high level risk down to very practical stuff, and that's very encouraging, seeing that stuff on the ground. One question that arose, and it's not really about the detail of this, but it's just something that triggered. Contaminants is mentioned there, and there's a subgroup and so on, which is great. And I know when we're looking at the buildings, there's a concern about not having the facilities we might need. I just wondered, are there alternative arrangements or contingency? Do we work with other agencies so that if there's a contamination thing, we can use their facilities to, or you know, I just wondered what the arrangements were. I know we're moving forward with that, and I know, as I say, we want to try and build that into buildings, but I just wondered what sort of contingencies and alternatives we have in place at the moment and how we manage that.
Liz, is that yourself?
Yeah, I chair the contaminants group, Malcolm, so I can probably help with that. So what we have is a very clear blueprint of what a station should look like in the ideal world. And with any new stations or refurbs, which clearly are not happening very often, granted, but with any of those, we know exactly what it should be like. But overlaid over that is behaviour and practices that utilise the best of the facilities that are there. and we've run some pilots across a wide variety of stations so RVDS stations at the lowest end of the scale right through to our older stations that have not been set up in the way that that our new ones would be. So we've run pilots in all of those stations, and we've identified a number of actions that we can take. Some of them are practical, some of them are equipment related, but I have to say the majority is behaviour related, so it's about culture. So and Julie's done a sterling piece of work with the subgroup there, which is the service delivery piece of that, which is the bulk of it, to be honest, in terms of practical things as well as behavioural things that are being rolled out. We're doing a whole host of other things as well, examining behaviour at scenes, how we decontaminate from scenes, how we transport kit. We're testing wipes to wipe down skin, and there's a massive amount of work going on there, and it's backed by really solid research that actually the FBU commissioned from the University of Lancashire, and they've done a brilliant piece of work. They came and did some analysis at our stations and did some testing, so they've been able to really support and help us target the work that's going on there. So it's not a perfect world, Malcolm, and sometimes the facilities are just not where we'd want them to be, but there are some simple things that we can put in place to make things much safer and as safe as they can be.
No, that's really helpful. I'm just conscious it's come up more in the building context, and we're not going to solve the building one for quite a while. So
no.
So it's really helpful to know the other work that's going on there. Thank you.
Okay.
Steve?
Could I ask about the new risk at 1G, please, and the fact that target date is April 23? That seems a long way away.
Steve, it might help if you had the paper references that I think people are scrolling.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find it.
Page 129 of 212, new directorate risks, Appendix 1G, and it's about the delay in the development of the bespoke health and safety management system. I think we heard about this earlier, and the suggestion that something was happening in the next few weeks, which is why April 23 surprised me.
Julie, I think, have you got the answer to that question?
Yes, I do, Chair. We're developing our own management system to allow us to interrogate information that would then help inform. So we have the background to this is we had approached our colleagues in ICT, and we developed a phased approach looking at a number of modules over each year. We have concluded phase 2 of that. However, there is issues with reporting functionality with some of the original modules, which is limiting the amount of management information that we can draw down from the system, Steve. So ICT have appointed an external contractor to come in for a period of time to address that issue. Once that issue is addressed, then that drops into the other modules that are sitting behind. But what we don't want to do is to do a huge release of 7 or 8 modules very quickly to our frontline staff. So it's a kind of staggered release, which has knocked that out slightly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions or queries? When we've discussed this previously, in addition to another couple of conversations around some of the assurance reports, we have previously highlighted that we would like to have a spotlight looking at the RDS. And given what John has said, what Liz has said, and what Stuart has said, it actually sounds like that might be quite an opportune time to have a look at that, because it looks like there is some positive movement as well, which gives the committee that opportunity to not only seek sort of more clarity around some of the issues, but also assurance that actually that work is progressing and progressing successfully as well. So is there any objection, I suppose, to potentially a future spotlight on that area? None at all. Okay, excellent. In which case then, I think we can move on to item 11. Can I just check in with everybody? Are you content to keep going, or would you like a 5-minute comfort break? Keep going? Yep. Okay, anybody who was hoping for a comfort break, I'm sorry, the majority seems to have ruled. So feel free to disappear off if you need to. If we can, then if we move on to item 11, in which case it is the overview for the EPF in the first instance. Steve, that's yourself.
Thanks, Mary. I gave a similar overview update to the RANS committee this morning. So the Employee Partnership Forum meeting took place on the 17th of February. It went well and it was well attended, and some of the people who attended it are in the meeting today and may want to chip in. It was run as a workshop rather than as a formal meeting, and the main aim of the workshop was to invite people to share their aspirations for collaborative working. We had a short agenda that sort of led us into that. We looked at the history and background of the Employee Partnership Forum. We compared it with the Working Together framework, which was really helpful, and we had a look at the terms of reference. But actually what the meeting achieved really was setting the tone and the culture of managers and representative bodies coming together to work collaboratively on issues that would help us to build trust and would help us to tackle issues that are safe issues, because some issues are out of bounds, I think, for this sort of discussion. Some issues like national negotiations, some issues such as things that executives are taking forward already, there's a potential for Employee Partnership Forum to interfere and get in the way. So we set those boundaries out, and in asking people to set out what their aspirations were, I was really pleased that every single person who was there said that they felt that a new approach with some a different culture to the meeting and looking at some issues such as equality, diversity and inclusion would not only be very helpful, but that they would actively wish to engage constructively in doing so. So the areas of focus that we discussed are equality, diversity and inclusion, well-being, skills retention, and also diversity in recruitment, with the sort of medium-term aim of improving the extent to which the diversity of our workforce reflects the diversity of the population of Scotland. In terms of what was achieved on the day, I think working relationships, potential and avoiding banana skins was a success in itself. I'm very pleased with it, and everybody who I've spoken to subsequently has told me that they're looking forward to getting to grips with some of the issues that we've identified as area of focus. Now, in addition to that, the committee will still have to address its terms of reference, which see it dealing with issues that have been escalated from local level and without having been resolved there. So there are some formal things for the committee to do, for the forum to do, but actually I think its real value to the service may be in establishing a different spirit of collaboration between managers and representative bodies. Anyone else who is there, please feel free to add to that.
Thanks, Steve. Does anybody wish to add to that? Does anybody have any questions, queries? Everybody's pretty content, I think, Steve, so well done. Excellent. Sorry, I keep turning my papers over and losing my point of reference. But if we can then move on to 11.2, which is the PAG update. Liz, I know that there has been a PAG, or I believe that there's been a PAG.
Yes, there was a PAG yesterday. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it. But Steve, were you there? No, sorry. But as I understand, I don't think anyone's here that was there, but so it was only attended by one union, which was Derek Jackson from Unison. So that in itself was interesting, but he was very complimentary, as I understand it, about the EPF discussion. So he was he was hopeful that we could have some constructive discussions during that forum. He also highlighted a couple of concerns about communication, that of things that they hadn't been told about before they were going out. This was around the agile working policy, so I've taken a note of that, and we'll work with my team to make sure we share as much as we can. They don't have any concerns about it, but there's some communications going out about phased return to work and so on, and they weren't told in advance that was going out, so it's fair comment. So I think, you know, it was a reasonably short meeting. I don't think there was anything else significant raised, but unfortunately I was not able to actually make it.
Thanks, Liz. Well, in that case, I won't necessarily ask if there's any questions, because it would feel unfair to make Liz answer them. Although if anybody's desperate, I'm sure we can take them away. Seeing any hand raised, so that's grand. In which case, we're going to move into the section of the agenda, and the next sort of 3-5 reports, I think, are all for information only. So a couple of things on that. One is that the committee have had the chance to read through the papers, so just a plea to some extent that when we get to each of the items, if we can just have a highlight of the couple of the key points or key messages that you wish to put across into our committee members. I'm hoping that if you have got questions, that they are sort of prepared and that you've had that chance to read through those papers. So on that note, Kerry, what a pressure we put you under, but I'm passing you over now, or passing to you now.
Thank you very much, Chair and Committee, and thank you for the introduction. Noting the requirement to be succinct, I guess there's probably two highlights I would like to pull out from this update paper from BFT to note or to bring to the committee's attention before I invite questions. And the first of those is the first of the two areas where we've made some quite significant progress of late is that we've commenced a senior management leadership climate and reflection exercise. So we've sent out some psychometrics and survey, leadership climate survey, based around the activity of our senior management board, or at least our heads of function and service, to inform how we shape up our leadership style and approach moving forward, and bring forward any learnings from our leadership approach through the pandemic period. So that exercise has commenced and is ongoing and is likely to be running for the next few months. So I will provide updates as that progresses, but that's commenced. The second update then is to let the committee know that we have progressed the Leadership Development Services Framework tender, where we're looking to pull together a suite of potential providers to support our leadership development moving forward over the next 4 years. In a flexible, agile and responsive kind of a way. And we're starting the evaluation of that at the moment, and we're looking to have those service providers identified and contracts and whatnot in place from early in the next financial year. So, and that would be in support of broadening out our workforce and leadership provision under pillars 2 and 3. So those are the two main changes that we've made, or progress areas that we've made to date, and noting that we're moving forward with the communications and the development of the programme, and looking to get some launch plans in place when resources and timing allow us, thinking about we're still, I guess, in that recovery stage from the pandemic. So without further ado, I'm quite happy to ask if there's any questions from the committee.
Thank you. That's great that we've seen some progress around those as well. So that's a great update. Thank you very much. Are there any questions or queries? In which case, well done, and a huge thank you for that update.
Thank you, Chair and Committee.
All right. Can we move on then to item 13, which is the learning needs analysis? And it's still with yourself, I think, is it?
No, that's actually, I think that's been changed to myself.
Sorry, Anne. I apologise.
Oh, that's me. So the two updates I would like to give on the learning needs analysis report, and again, like Kerry, I'll keep it brief as I'm conscious it's a busy agenda. We are currently moving that forward in terms of working with our learning partners to prioritise and deliver against the training that they've identified as priority for themselves in this last few weeks of our current financial year, our current performance year. And that process is going well. In terms of our new approach to how we want to take our LNA forward 22-23, We've had a number of successful meetings now with our learning partners, so our 22-23 approach to the LNE is shaping up very nicely. Lots of good engagement across our service, and very much taking the LNE from a written kind of static document to much more of a living document that guides and influences where we invest our money for the development of our people. There is one wee point I would like to draw to your attention in terms of the investment across the directorates in the service and the end of the document. You'll note that the investment sorry, I've stalled. 37.3%. Just to highlight to you that as pod, we do invest for the entire organisation. So actually about 80% of that investment has been on service-wide provision. Would just be a wee point to draw to your attention.
Thank you, Anne. You did lose a tiny little bit, but I think we got the point of that.
I do apologise for my technology.
It wasn't your fault, my dear. So I wouldn't worry. I just to check, are there any questions from within the committee? None at all. Can I just ask, and just in terms of the pandemic, is there anything in particular that you're seeing manifesting within your planning or anything that's coming through that relates to that in any way, shape or form?
I think the pandemic has had an impact on our services' ability to release people. So a lot of our plans have had to be extremely flexible around both the initial COVID hitting and also the Omicron increase around Christmas time. So and that's just the nature of ensuring that our operational services can continue. I can't prioritise training over that. So, but it's been very good in terms of the functions keeping in touch with us and giving us some time to respond to that.
Thank you. And again, I wouldn't necessarily take an indication if no questions is anything other than just a fully appreciation of the comprehensive report. Although Steve is now just coming in there. Sorry, Steve.
Sorry, Maria. I pressed the hands up button at exactly the point that you said that no questions was good. So I appreciate that was terrible timing. And I was going to ask about at 5.1.1, it says that we may not be able to fund all of the activity. And yet at a different point of the report, it said that the demand far exceeds the resource available. So the two didn't quite align to me, and I wondered if you could just sort of reconcile those two statements.
So when we have our initial LNEs come in, we see usually a range of requests. And actually that's part of the way we'll work with our services forward, is that very much when we look at the LNEs, we will work with our learning partners to be very clear about what the priorities are. And if they move across the year, that we can reflect that in our financing and support for that request. So what you see in terms of the initial LNE coming in very often exceeds the budget we have. And we then go back out to work with our functions more closely to really hone in and help them focus on what they need to be delivered. So that's always in the start of the year in the perfect situation. Unfortunately, COVID has sent some of our plans skywards at various points, but certainly working closely has allowed us to keep on top of that and manage to get the development needs that are critical and priority delivered and within budget.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And I think if we can then, if I haven't completely confused my names against reports, which I have steadily done throughout the entire meeting, it's yourself now as well for item 14 in terms of the learning agreement.
Yep, certainly. So the learning agreement is really the formalisation of a kind of collective partnership approach we have. And it looks to formalise and develop that strong foundation of partnership working to support continuous lifelong learning across our people. We deliver a range of programmes through that, which people can access at a time that suits them. So our collective partnership can run stuff well out of hours. So you will find that we have a good uptake across our a range of our IT provision and across areas such as CV writing, understanding finances, and so on. So it really complements and adds to the LNA provision that we've just discussed, and provides that additional flexibility for people. So in summary, it's an area that's working very well. It's well accessed by all our people, and is supported well.
Thank you. And Malcolm.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks. Again, very positive development, very helpful to see this. I think that, is good going forward. Just one slightly technical point. Under who the agreement covers on page 151, it says it covers all full and part-time employees, which is fine. I just wondered, we obviously have the volunteer duty system. Technically, are VDS employees? I'm not quite sure about that. And if they're not and they're covered, should we say this includes volunteer duty system? I'm not sure. I just wondered if they were technically employees when they're classed as volunteers, and whether we should make reference to that.
Right, that would be an area that I would have to go back and check with my HR colleagues in terms of just that technical position about volunteers. And I don't know if Lindsay or Liz would like to comment on that.
On that point, yes. Despite the terminology of volunteer duty system, Malcolm, sorry, I should have introduced myself, Lindsay Gaia, Head of POD. They are classed as employees. They do have a formal contract of employment with the service.
No, that's fine. I think that fully clarifies it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Malcolm. And I think this is it's really exciting to be able to see this coming together, and anything that commits the organisation even more formally to supporting lifelong learning is a positive step as well. So again, from the committee, I'm sure a huge thank you for bringing this, and well done. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much for your time today, people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if we can then move on to item 15 now. Ali, if I understood it correctly, the person I've got down here, Richie, I think it is not here today. John, are you taking this?
No, Richie is here. He was just coming in for this paper, Chair. If I could just quickly introduce it.
Yep.
So the committee will be aware that some time ago there was a review carried out of training under Paul Stewart and Liz. So when I came in and we developed the Training Safety and Assurance Directorate, we took that on board, and over a year, 18 months ago, we managed to get Richie to come in and specifically be the project manager for us and deliver against this, which he's actually taken the bull by the horns and really pushed on with us as much as he possibly can. So I thought it would be timely to bring an update on the continuous improvement programme, and allow Richie to give the committee an update to see that there is progress going on, even though during COVID it did stop us at some point. So over to Rich. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. The report that you see in front of you is regarding our continuous improvement programme within training. There are 56 recommendations within the programme. Currently, we have completed 11, 33 are in progress, and 12 have been deferred. We have an overall progress of around 52%. The 12 recommendations that have been deferred are deferred due to areas of work that are out with our control. So, for example, awaiting on CRIM 2 being published, and also the impending enactment of Section 19 of the Road Safety Act. So that involves improvements that we wanted to make to driver training, etc., but we need to wait on where that enactment is going. The main area of improvement that we've been working on is with regard to our training for operational competence framework. Now, that has an influence on all operational staff throughout the country on all duty systems. There are 3 drivers for making the changes to our training for operational competence framework, and that is our internal review, a review done by Her Majesty's Fire Service Inspectorate with regard to routine duty system training. And when Her Majesty's Fire Safety Inspectorate went along to do that audit, they also took along Education Scotland with them. So we have all three reports, and the recommendations from all three reports, we have tied them up into one bundle, if you like, and we're looking to make the training for operational competency framework satisfy all those recommendations, which I'm glad to say we have done. So this is obviously a huge piece of work for us, and it is the main area of work we've been working on. It will have many improvements for all duty systems, creating capacity, improved training, more enjoyable training, which as we go forward, and I'm happy to take any questions on that. With regard to the wider continuous improvement programme, it is now 3 years since the programme was officially published. There's a lot of water went under the bridge since then, as well as the pandemic, new ways of working, etc. So during the month of March, this month that we're in now, we will be doing a review of all the recommendations that are still outstanding to see if they are still fit for purpose, or if there are we can enhance some of those recommendations and take them further. So the recommendation, Chair, is that we're asking the committee to note the progress that has been made within the continuous improvement programme and the imminent major improvements that we're making to the training for operational competence framework. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Richie. And I know, just before I check with the rest of the committee as well, that obviously training is a pretty significant focus and has been for some time now. And I know that back what feels like the old days, when we could actually go around and speak to individuals within stations, training was something that regularly came up in terms of our engagement with individuals. So it's really good to see the progress that's being noted within the report, Richie. I'm going to invite Fiona in.
Thanks, Chair. Fiona Thorburn. Question, Richie, you mentioned a review of the recommendations, which seems very sensible given A, how long ago it was, and B, all that's happened since then. Roughly how long do you think that review will take, and will that come back here, or where does it go?
The review itself won't take long at all. If I'm honest with you, we have all the recommendations contained within our action log, and pretty much what we're going to do is go through each of those. There are a number of recommendations that have actually been delivered through the pandemic as business as usual, you know, with managers looking for ways of improving how they deliver training. So that's one good aspect to it. So it won't take long at all. And if the ACO wants us to bring it back to this committee, I'm more than happy to do that once that review is complete.
Hey, John.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Fiona, thanks for that. Fiona, what my intention to do is, with the review, it'll go to my DMT first, and then it'll feed in through the SMB, and then ultimately it'll end up back here, because this committee had looked at the original version, and it's my intention that the reviewed version, once it's through the governance route, will then find its way to this table to allow the committee to scrutinise what has been decided at SMB and SLT. So it'll follow the normal governance route, and this committee will definitely get to see it.
Yeah, okay, thanks both.
That's grand. I'd actually picked up a question I was going to have as well. So unless there's anything else from the committee, I think it's just to say thank you for the update, Richie, and we look forward to being able to be further updated pending the review that you've mentioned as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. If we can move on then to the last item before we go into the forward planning section, then that's the measurement of asbestos fires during live burn. And is it Jim who's taking this, or John? You've got your hand up, sorry.
Yeah, Chair, it's just I wouldn't mind doing a wee introduction on this, and it's to save Jim and Julie's blushes here. This was a piece of work that Jim and Julie took off their own back to go and do. And they've done a cracking piece of work behind the scenes to get it to this position. It wasn't something that I commissioned, but it was something that was commissioned within health and safety, as trying to be ensuring that our procedures, etc., were appropriate when it comes to dealing with asbestos, that everything that we've got as an ops procedure is correct. But Julie and Jim took this off their own back to go and do it and seek support from a university to deliver it. So Over to Julie and Jim now. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Chair. If it's okay, I'll maybe take the lead on this one. As John mentioned, the purpose of this is really just we wanted to ensure that the arrangements that we had in place were sufficient for our firefighter safety, and to provide some idea of the level of risk that firefighters and perhaps some certain support staff would face if they attended an incident where there was asbestos containing material present. Without going into all the detail, because there is a very technical report there, which if you can't sleep at night, that's the document to read. But I think in summary, asbestos containing material was only banned in the UK in 1999, so therefore we still have a significant number of buildings that contains this material. I think the effects of inhalation of asbestos containing material, or ACM as we call it, are generally widely known. There has been a lot of focus, as we've discussed already, on the presence and the effects of contaminants to firefighters, but there has been little or no research as to the effects of asbestos containing material to firefighters, and that prompted a desire within ourselves to at least initiate some research into that. We were very fortunate to be able to engage a very well-known asbestos expert, a world-renowned expert, to participate in this project with us, as well as the University of Edinburgh, who looked at the behaviours of fires and to ensure that we replicated similar burns throughout the experiment. We also engaged with Glasgow City Council, so they participated and kindly provided us with a derelict building that we could set alight, and we installed 2 of the most common types of asbestos. Without going into all the technical detail, which is there, we fire loaded these rooms, we set them alight, we waited for the kind of average response time, and we asked personnel from Govan Fire Station to put out the fire in the way that they would normally do in an operational context, and thereafter to decontaminate as they would normally do in an operational context. And I think in summary, that within 310 of the report, you'll see that the fibre count indicates no significant risk, and in fact no more than perhaps the rest of us would face on a day-to-day basis. It gives advice regarding our exclusion zones, of which we already exceed within our procedures, and I think in summary gives us an assurance that our decontamination procedures and how we managed asbestos is more than sufficient. We were keen to have further engagement with the HSE in relation to this. We have had that engagement with limited success, I have to say, and that they will not recognise one small piece of research, but would be looking to do a UK-wide research. So that's further discussion that we would have with NFCC as we progress. And in relation to some of the other action points in the report, they have already progressed. But I think it's really just to give the committee assurance that our procedures are more than robust at this point in time.
Thank you, Julie. I think that does give a significant amount of research, of reassurance. It's always nice when you do a piece of research and realise you don't need to change anything as well, because that also means that historically it's been a positive situation too. I'm not surprised that Paul's got his hand up, but Malcolm beat you first, I'm afraid. So if we go to Malcolm first and then to Paul.
Thank you. It's just I need to get out more because I actually really enjoyed reading this. I just I thought it was an interesting report. There was a lot of good information in it. So thank you. And again, great to have, as you say, these levels and vindicate. It's just a question about breathing apparatus, because what I don't see in there is any reference to that. As I read it, this is the amount of asbestos present in the atmosphere and so on. But I would have thought if you're wearing BA, that would stop you inhaling it, kind of thing. So it's not really in the report, I don't think, but I just wondered if I could understand that a bit more, just as background. Thanks.
Yep, absolutely, Malcolm. I mean, obviously the firefighters entered the building with their BA on, and you're quite right, that does stop the inhalation. I think the risk area is after that, when they come out and they maybe want to decontaminate and take off their BA. So that was the particular area we wanted to focus on, and also linking in with the earlier discussion about, was that successful, or were we taking asbestos back into the appliance, back into the station, linking it with the contaminants piece of work. So we've had reassurance on all of those fronts that that is not the case.
Okay, thank you.
Paul?
I thought this was amazingly good, really quite startlingly good.
Thank you, Paul.
It really was first rate. When I was the regional director with HSE, I had the national lead for asbestos licensing. So I was often dealing with very, very dubious organisations in asbestos, and occasionally very good ones. I thought the reassurance you're able to give us is incredibly useful. You're talking about sharing it with other fire brigades, obviously. I also thought this is the sort of thing that needs to be written up into an academic journal, because the quality of this is such that, working with Edinburgh University, it ought to be being put into the formal scientific process. And if your colleagues who you're working with at Edinburgh University aren't doing that, I'm surprised. But I thought you had the potential here of something which should be made more aware and recorded for sort of academia as well. So first rate, absolutely.
Julie, do you want to come back on that point about the academic side of things?
Yeah, absolutely, and to thank Paul for his comments and compliments. I need to go away and find out how I do that, and I think I'll certainly liaise with Edinburgh and Roger Willie.
I think Edinburgh would certainly know how to do that, and they'll
Right.
have the experience. And Luke Bisbee, who I think is the chair there, would be an interesting guy. And I think this is so important at the moment. That we're getting good quality fire science, and this is fire science for the first rate.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. John, and then I've got a couple of things to add myself.
Yeah, just very quickly, it's just so the next place for this will be going to the National Fire Chiefs Council Health and Safety Group, the national group which the Chief Officer chairs. It's the intention to get it on the next agenda, not this one, but the next agenda item, and that's where we'll start to share it with other fire and rescue services up and down the country. I wanted to make sure that we got it through our processes first, and then finally got the final scrutiny from yourselves, or from information from yourselves. So that's the next route for it, as well as what Paul's just suggested with regard to the academic side. So thanks, Paul, for the feedback, and Malcolm.
And if I can then just draw everybody's attention as well to the comments in the chat bar from Steve, who's also saying this is a superb piece of work, so very well done. And yeah, I think just Julianne to Jim, well done. Seriously, this is a absolute top class element in terms of what you're able to do. It's a fantastic showcase. So thank you very much for what you've done, and for the difference it makes to the service as well. That's important too. I think we have now moved on to item 17. And to the forward planning section, which means that we're probably a little bit ahead of time, which is good. I know how people do appreciate that. So in the first instance, if we can ask now, my apologies, I know I got it wrong earlier on, but I'm sure that this now is Mary in terms of the pod policy review schedule update. Am I correct?
That's correct, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. So this report is presented to the Committee for Information, and this is Q3, which takes us up to the end of the 31st of December. And as previously reported, the plan takes into account the Directorate Plan and our priorities for moving forward 21-22, and takes into account a focus on essential work as well as our stakeholder engagement. So if I can direct you to section 3.2 of the report, first of all, during this period we commence work on a number of health and wellbeing documents which are now being considered as guidance notes under the umbrella of an overarching health and wellbeing policy, and these include things like vaccinations, case management, clinical audit and health and wellbeing records management. This piece of work is also part of a wider policy review that we're conducting for POD, and the plan for this will be finalised by the end of Q4. In terms of our statutory health and medical surveillance policy, this was presented to SLT back in December with an options appraisal and a number of recommendations. And following feedback from SLT, we conducted some more research for the director, and the report will now return to SLT on the 22nd of March. It will then progress to the contaminants group, and it will be presented to this committee on the 2nd of June next quarter. In terms of section 3.3, the working together framework has now been finalised, and it was originally been returned to SLT in February, but that is now going to be March, so it will be this month as opposed to February. The secondary employment policy, which includes in-scope driving, that we've been progressing since probably autumn last year. We have now started our workshops with our trade union representatives, and the feedback that we receive from this week and the final one next Monday, the 7th of March, will feed into our consultation process. Our employee recognition scheme will be launched in April, and that will be week commencing the 18th of April. So you've probably seen a straw poll that was conducted during January on our iHub, and it's now been decided that the name of the scheme will be Recognition Awards. A number of focus groups were also held during January in order to get further views around a number of suitable categories for various nominations, and 6 categories have now been established, which links in with the service objectives. A number of teaser comms on these different categories are going to be launched over the coming weeks in the lead up to the launch of the 18th of April. And we've been working closely with our comms team in order to develop branding for the new recognition scheme, with a dedicated iHub page in place to support that process. And finally, Chair, our dignity and respect policy will go live on the 14th of March. We now have 15 contact advisors in place who have all received training in time for the policy to go live on the 14th of March. Some comms on this will be issued early next week. And we will have a week's familiarisation of the policy before we go live, and any information on the policy itself will be held within the pod iHub pages under your employment. So that is a summary, Chair, of the policy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Do we have any questions or queries? Anything to add? No? Excellent. I think that was very comprehensive, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, folks.
17.2 then is a health and safety policy management arrangements. Julie, is this yourself?
It is again. Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this as short as I can. The report provides an update on our progress with regards to the development of a health and safety policy, and more specifically the management arrangements which support that. There was a delay in Q3 for all the reasons that have been mentioned, but particularly for ourselves, it was we had to divert resources to support our colleagues in operations with regards some COP26 work streams. However, you'll see within the appendix that we have caught up slightly towards the end of Q3, and that we are now completely back on target with only 2 arrangements requiring completion in Q4. And it was really just to ask the board to note that progress.
Thank you very much, Julie. I think we're happy and content to note that, but are there any questions or queries? Again, just comprehensive, so very much, thank you. Okay, 17.3 then, in terms of the committee forward plan, that's attached on the paperwork. I don't know if Ali or anybody else has any questions or queries that they want to particularly highlight to us.
Nothing further to add from both side, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. In which case I'm going to take that everybody's reasonably content with what's proposed. Excellent. And then just under 17.4, which is items for consideration for the future, at either the Integrated Governance Forum, at the board, or the Strategy Day meetings, can I ask committee to particularly highlight to me any items that they feel are important that when I feed back to the board that should be highlighted from the discussion we've had today? Is there anything that you feel should be? I'm quite content to take those off of the after the meeting, as it were, as well. But if there's anything that is striking you just now, any thoughts? I think it's fair that we should probably pick up in terms of that asbestos paper as well, given how significant that is, just as a thank you.
Can I just say I'd agree with that,
Mhm.
Mary? I think that's such an outstanding piece of work. The board should, I don't think they should have a presentation on it. They don't need it.
No.
They should be just told that that sort of is the calibre of work that's being produced.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul.
I think it would also be useful just to give that update on the employee partnership forum that was given. I think that was really helpful, and the whole board should be aware of that, if that's okay.
Grant? Like I said, I'm happy for you guys to drop me a note as well, between now and the board as well, if anything kind of comes to mind, equally from Liz, from John, Stuart, as you feel appropriate too. Is there anything else in terms of strategy days or integrated governance anybody wants to highlight? No. Excellent. In which case, Ali, I don't think that there are any substantive actions other than just, I suppose, to note again to everybody that we do have these upcoming discussions, and there will be something hopefully to that. That's not so much an action; it's just me highlighting that. And is that you're nodding, Ali? So you're content.